Lily Thompson was a whirlwind of curiosity and laughter at just 3 years old. Living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio, her days were filled with chasing butterflies in the yard, building forts out of blankets, and carrying her favorite stuffed doll everywhere she went. Her mother, Corinne, often joked that Lily was fearless, a tiny explorer whose imagination knew no boundaries. On this particular afternoon, the sun cast golden streaks across the Thompsons' manicured lawn, and Lily, oblivious to the ordinary world's rules, had ventured a little farther than usual, her tiny feet padding across the soft grass. As she twirled with her doll clutched tightly to her chest, the peaceful suburban street suddenly erupted into chaos. A neighbor, Mr. Daniels, had spotted a figure he didn't recognize lingering near Lily's house and, in a rush of concern, called 911. Within minutes, the calm of the neighborhood shattered as police vehicles screeched to a halt. The officers stepped out swiftly, their eyes scanning the surroundings with trained precision. Among them was Officer Randall, holding the leash of Kaiser, the department's highly trained police dog. Kaiser was a sleek German shepherd, powerful, alert, and capable of responding to threats with astonishing speed. To a civilian, he was imposing. To Officer Randall, he was a loyal partner, a protector trained to respond to danger without hesitation. Corinne, who had been inside preparing snacks for Lily, heard the commotion and rushed outside, her heart hammering. Her eyes widened as she saw the police officer and the dog moving closer to her daughter. "Lily, come here," Corinne called, but her tiny daughter was too enthralled by a butterfly to notice. Lily's laughter rang out, carefree, as she toddled toward the edge of the yard. Kaiser, sensing movement, barked sharply, muscles tensing. The officers immediately yelled for Lily to stand still, but the words barely registered to a 3-year-old absorbed in play. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, some frozen in concern, others clutching their phones to capture the unfolding scene. From the sidewalk, Mr. Daniels shouted, "Keep her back. That dog is trained to respond to threats." But Lily, innocent and fearless, continued her approach, reaching out toward the barking dog as if it were a giant stuffed toy. Officer Randall tightened his grip on the leash, attempting to maintain control. His voice boomed, authoritative but calm, trying to prevent panic. "Easy, Kaiser, easy." The dog barked and lunged forward slightly, testing the boundaries of its training. Corinne ran, arms outstretched, fear overtaking reason. A neighborhood seemed to hold its collective breath. This was a tiny girl, alone, facing a creature trained for protection and danger, yet unaware of the gravity of the moment. Then something remarkable happened. Lily, in her tiny, high-pitched voice, giggled at Kaiser's bark. "It's okay, puppy," she said, stretching out her hand. The words, innocent and full of trust, seemed to diffuse the tension in the air. Officers glanced at each other in disbelief. They had prepared for confrontation, for fear, for chaos, but not for the fearless innocence of a 3-year-old. Kaiser's ears twitched, the aggressive tension slowly melting as he sniffed the small hand extended toward him. Corinne finally reached Lily, scooping her into her arms as the dog settled back under Officer Randall's control. Relief washed over the yard, and neighbors whispered in awe at the scene they had just witnessed. What could have been a tragic encounter turned into a moment of strange, heartwarming calm. Yet, despite the relief, the incident did not go unnoticed. Officer Randall filed an official report, citing the unusual circumstances and noting the risk involved with a child approaching a police dog. Corinne, while relieved, felt a growing unease. Why had the police arrived with such urgency? Why had they brought a dog capable of causing harm toward her daughter? Questions swirled as she hugged Lily close, the little girl oblivious to the drama she had just diffused. The police report triggered a chain reaction that neither Corinne nor her husband Mark could have predicted. Within days, a court notice arrived, requesting their presence for a public safety review. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip, neighbors speculating on the seriousness of the case. Some saw Lily as the hero of the incident, her courage remarkable for someone so young. Others questioned the family's responsibility for allowing her to wander near a trained police dog. Media outlets began picking up the story, framing it as a bizarre yet compelling narrative, a tiny toddler facing a mighty police canine in a suburban yard. For Lily, however, the incident was already fading into the background of her busy little life. She returned to her toys, her dolls, and the endless exploration of her small world, unaware of the headlines her actions were generating. Karen and Mark, though, felt the weight of the situation pressing upon them. They knew that the coming court proceedings would be unlike any other. The innocence of their daughter had become the focal point of an unusual legal matter, one that tested perceptions of fear, responsibility, and courage. As the day ended, the sun dipped behind the houses, casting long shadows across the Thompsons' yard. Lily lay in her mother's arms, yawning and rubbing her eyes, still holding her doll tightly. The neighborhood returned to its calm suburban rhythm, but the memory of that afternoon lingered. A tiny girl had faced a police dog, not with fear or defiance, but with trust and empathy. It was a moment that would be retold countless times, both in the courtroom and in the press, a reminder that courage comes in many forms, often where it is least expected. In the quiet of the evening, Karen reflected on the day's events. She marveled at Lily's bravery, realizing that her daughter had done something remarkable without even knowing it. She had bridged the gap between fear and trust, between authority and innocence, with nothing more than a simple phrase, "It's okay, puppy." Little did the family know. This small act of courage would soon make national headlines, spark debates about police procedures, and inspire a courtroom drama that no one could have anticipated. Lily's world was small, her intentions pure, and yet the ripples of her actions were about to reach far beyond the Thompsons' quiet street. By the time the stars appeared in the sky, the Thompson family settled into their home, unaware that their lives were about to change. The incident with Kaiser, the mighty K9, had set into motion a story that would capture hearts across the country. It was a tale of innocence meeting authority, of courage disguised as play, and of a 3-year-old whose words and actions would challenge perceptions in ways adults never could. And for Lily, the adventure was only beginning. The Thompson family had barely settled back into the routine of their quiet suburban life when a formal letter arrived, stamped and official. Karen tore open the envelope with trembling hands, her mind racing as she read the words, "Notice of court appearance, public safety review." At first, she thought it was a mistake. After all, Lily was just a toddler, a playful, innocent 3-year-old. How could a court summon possibly involve her? But the letter was real, outlining the date, time, and nature of the hearing. It referenced the incident with Kaiser, the department's police dog, marking it as a matter of public safety and legal oversight. Mark, Lily's father, paced the living room. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with frustration and confusion. "They're treating this like she's in some kind of legal battle," he muttered, holding the letter in one hand while rubbing his forehead with the other. Karen's eyes were on Lily, who was happily stacking blocks on the floor, completely oblivious to the adult anxieties swirling around her. "She's 3, Karen said firmly. "She doesn't even understand the word court. How can they expect her to?" But the reality was unavoidable. The Thompson family needed legal counsel, and they needed it fast. The courtroom that awaited them was small but packed. Local residents, neighbors, and even curious onlookers from surrounding towns had heard about the unusual case, a toddler facing scrutiny after an encounter with a trained police dog. Some had come to support the family, believing Lily's innocence warranted celebration. Others, more skeptical, worried about the potential dangers of a child interacting with law enforcement animals. The buzz of whispers filled the room as journalists shuffled notebooks and cameramen adjusted their cameras. Social media had already dubbed it the trial of the tiny girl versus the mighty canine, and the attention was only growing. Karen clutched Lily's hand tightly as they entered the courtroom. The little girl's eyes widened at the sight of the wooden benches, the stern faces of adults in suits, and the raised platform where the judge would preside. "It's okay, Mommy," Lily said softly, clutching her stuffed rabbit closer. Her innocence radiated a calm that contrasted sharply with the tension around her. Mark gave her a reassuring smile, whispering, "You're safe, Pumpkin." But even he wondered how a 3-year-old could possibly navigate the complexities of a legal system built for adults. Officer Randall was present, as was Kaiser, who sat obediently by his side. The dog's presence, though controlled, reminded everyone that this was no ordinary court case. Experts from the police department, child psychologists, and witnesses from the neighborhood would all testify, adding layers to the narrative. Some neighbors had even prepared statements, eager to clarify what they had seen that day. A debate was quietly forming within the courtroom. Was this truly a matter of public safety, or had overreaction and misunderstanding escalated a simple, innocent encounter? The judge, an experienced but fair-minded woman named Judge Henderson, called the court to order. Her eyes softened as they settled on Lily, who waved a tiny hand at Kaiser before returning to her mother's lap. "We are here to review the events of date involving a minor child and a police canine," Judge Henderson began. "This hearing will determine whether proper procedures were followed and whether any additional measures should be implemented to ensure the safety of the public and the welfare of all parties involved." Her voice was calm, authoritative, and measured, acknowledging the unusual nature of the case without sensationalizing it. Testimonies began with Officer Randall recounting the day of the incident. He spoke of the call from the neighbor, the arrival at the Thompson residence, and Kaiser's response. He described his concern as the child approached, emphasizing the potential risk to Lily. Yet, as he spoke, there was a noticeable hesitation when he described Lily's reaction, her calmness, her laughter, and the way she extended her hand toward the dog. It was clear even the officer recognized that something extraordinary had occurred. Some in the courtroom nodded in agreement, acknowledging that Lily's innocence had diffused a potentially tense situation. Next, neighbors were called to give their accounts. Mr. Daniels, the original caller, explained his concerns about a stranger, but admitted he had not actually seen Lily in immediate danger. Mrs. Morales, who lived across the street, spoke of Lily's fearless nature and her tendency to interact gently with animals. "She's a special little girl," Mrs. Morales said. "She doesn't understand fear like adults do. She only sees life, and life is friendly." Each testimony layered a mix of perspectives: fear, caution, admiration, and respect. The courtroom began to understand that the story was more nuanced than a simple safety violation. The child psychologist's testimony was perhaps the most compelling. Dr. Emily Sanders explained toddler behavior, emphasizing that Lily's instinctive approach to Kaiser reflected empathy and fearlessness, not recklessness. "Children at this age often exhibit natural curiosity and trust," Dr. Sanders explained. "Lily's behavior is typical for her developmental stage." Her approach to the dog was not threatening, and it demonstrates a remarkable capacity for understanding social cues, even at her young age. Her words resonated in the room. Adults, who had been quick to judge, now reconsidered their assumptions. Lily, sitting quietly on her mother's lap, seemed unaware of the impact she had made. Media outlets were present, capturing the story for national coverage. Reporters whispered among themselves, debating the headline angle: "Toddler faces police dog with bravery," or "3-year-old diffuses potential threat. Social media began buzzing as snippets of courtroom proceedings were shared live. Comments poured in from around the country, many praising Lily's courage and innocence. Some criticized police procedures, questioning whether protocol had unnecessarily escalated the situation. The Thompson family felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. They were becoming symbols of courage and innocence, but also under the scrutiny of millions of strangers. As the testimonies concluded, the courtroom settled into a tense silence. Judge Henderson leaned forward, her gaze sweeping across the room. "This is indeed an unusual case," she said softly. "We are reminded that children see the world differently, often with clarity and honesty that adults overlook. The purpose of this hearing is not to assign blame, but to understand and learn from the events that transpired." The judge's words highlighted the heart of the matter. This was a story about perspective, fear, trust, and the unpredictable courage of a tiny child. Karen hugged Lily tightly, whispering reassurance into her ear. Lily giggled, pointing at Kaiser. "Puppy's nice." Mark smiled, grateful for the simplicity of their daughter's worldview. In the gallery, neighbors whispered, some teary-eyed, others smiling at the innocence displayed before them. The stage was set for the next phase of the case, a live demonstration of Lily interacting with Kaiser in the courtroom. Everyone wondered, how would the child behave when faced with the full presence of the police dog, under the watchful eyes of the court and the nation? The tension was palpable, but hope and admiration for the little girl were equally strong. By the end of the first day of proceedings, the courtroom had shifted from initial apprehension to cautious fascination. Lily had already become more than a child in a legal matter. She was a symbol of bravery and innocence, challenging the adults around her to reconsider assumptions and judgments. Officers, neighbors, and court staff alike marveled at the tiny girl's ability to influence a room simply by being herself. Outside, the media speculated about what would happen next, while social media amplified every word, gesture, and reaction. The story of Lily Thompson was only beginning to unfold, and it promised to captivate hearts far beyond her quiet Ohio neighborhood. The Thompson family returned home that evening, exhausted but reflective. Lily fell asleep clutching her doll, oblivious to the growing attention she had drawn. Karen and Mark sat quietly, discussing the surreal day and the challenges ahead. One thing was certain. The tiny girl who had faced a police dog with nothing but innocence and trust had already begun changing minds. What came next, the demonstration, the judge's ruling, and the nation's reaction, would cement Lily's place in local history, and perhaps even national consciousness. The story was far from over, and the real lessons were just beginning to emerge. The morning of the courtroom demonstration arrived with a mix of anticipation, tension, and curiosity. Karen and Mark walked hand in hand with Lily into the courtroom, their tiny daughter bouncing slightly on her mother's hip, oblivious to the gravity of the situation. News crews and photographers lined the gallery, their cameras clicking and recording, capturing every moment. Reporters whispered excitedly among themselves, speculating how the toddler would react to Kaiser, the trained police dog, under controlled conditions. The courtroom, already tense from the previous day's testimonies, seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to witness a moment that was as unpredictable as it was remarkable. Kaiser, the German shepherd, sat obediently beside Officer Randall at the front of the courtroom. His ears pricked forward, muscles relaxed but ready to act if needed. The officers had carefully prepared for this demonstration, ensuring the dog was calm, secure, and responsive only to commands. The courtroom observers watched closely, aware that even a minor misstep could turn the demonstration into chaos. Yet, despite the preparation, a palpable sense of wonder filled the room. A 3-year-old was about to interact with a police dog trained for protection and potential aggression, and no one could predict the outcome. Judge Henderson called the court to order, her voice calm and measured. We will now conduct a demonstration to observe interactions between the minor involved and the police. K9 in a controlled environment, she announced. Her eyes softened as they fell on Lily, who waved at Kaiser with the innocence only a child could muster. Karen whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart," smoothing the girl's hair back from her forehead. Lily clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, her other hand reaching instinctively for her mother's. She glanced at Kaiser, her large brown eyes wide with curiosity, but free from fear. The officers guided Lily to a designated area of the courtroom floor, ensuring there was enough space for her to move safely while maintaining control over Kaiser. The tension was nearly tangible. Spectators leaned forward, whispering quietly among themselves. The media cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail. Even the officers seemed to pause, uncertain of how the encounter would unfold. And then Lily did something remarkable, something that would forever define the story of that day. She lowered her tiny hand and said, in her soft, lilting voice, "It's okay, puppy. You're nice." The words, simple and innocent, carried a power that no adult could replicate. Kaiser, trained for caution and defense, tilted his head as if recognizing her sincerity. The dog sniffed Lily's extended hand gently, then, with a subtle wag of his tail, allowed her to pet his head. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Spectators leaned back in their seats, amazed at the calmness of the interaction. Officer Randall relaxed slightly, realizing that Lily's innocence was having a tangible effect on the dog. Karen held her breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never imagined that her tiny daughter, who had only yesterday wandered into the yard chasing butterflies, would now be the center of national attention for her fearless approach to a trained canine. Mark, too, felt a mixture of pride and awe. Lily giggled softly as she stroked Kaiser's fur, oblivious to the murmurs of admiration and astonishment around her. "See, Mommy? Puppy's nice," she said, her words brimming with a natural authority that only a child untouched by fear could possess. The child psychologist, Dr. Sanders, nodded approvingly from her seat. "This is a remarkable example of instinctive empathy and social awareness in a toddler," she explained to the judge. "Lily's behavior demonstrates a natural ability to read cues and respond in a way that diffuses potential aggression. It's unusual, but not unprecedented in children of her developmental stage." Her professional analysis brought weight to what everyone had witnessed. A tiny child, through innocence and trust alone, calming a highly trained police dog in a tense environment. The media cameras captured every detail, replaying the moment on monitors for those unable to see it live. Reporters whispered excitedly, comparing notes and speculating on the headlines. "Toddler tames police dog with bravery," and 3-year-old's innocence shifts courtroom atmosphere. Social media lit up instantly, with clips of the encounter shared thousands of times within minutes. Hashtags praising Lily's bravery and innocence began trending, even as the courtroom proceedings continued. The story of a tiny girl and a mighty canine had captured the public imagination. Officer Randall, who had initially been wary, found himself impressed by Lily's natural composure. He whispered quietly to his colleagues, She's remarkable." Kaiser, still calm and obedient, had responded entirely to Lily's gentle demeanor, illustrating a point that no amount of adult reasoning could replicate. Empathy, even from a child, could bridge gaps that authority and training sometimes could not. The courtroom atmosphere softened as the demonstration continued. Judges, officers, spectators, and even journalists were struck by the contrast between fear and trust, authority and innocence. Judge Henderson leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "This demonstration illustrates a significant point regarding children and trained animals," she remarked. "While proper protocol and caution are necessary, it also highlights the capacity for children to respond instinctively in ways that adults may not anticipate. This observation will be crucial in determining the conclusions and recommendations arising from this hearing. Her measured words emphasized the unusual nature of the case without diminishing the importance of safety, reinforcing that the encounter was both extraordinary and instructive. Karen and Mark watched with a mixture of relief and pride. Lily, still giggling softly, had managed to achieve what no adult could establish: trust and calm in a highly controlled but potentially tense environment. The officers nodded in recognition of her unique ability. Neighbors in attendance whispered their admiration, some wiping away tears as they observed the pure innocence at the center of the courtroom drama. The media scrambled to capture every word and gesture, knowing that the story of Lily and Kaiser would resonate far beyond this small-town courtroom. Even as the demonstration concluded, the courtroom remained alive with discussion. Experts would later provide testimony analyzing the encounter, focusing on child behavior, canine response, and the importance of clear protocols for police interactions with children. But in that moment, Lily had said more than anyone in the courtroom could articulate. Fear is often a choice, but innocence and trust can disarm even the most trained and powerful forces. She had bridged worlds, demonstrating that courage is not always measured in size, strength, or experience. As Lily was escorted back to her parents' arms, she waved at Kaiser one last time. "Bye-bye, puppy," she said cheerfully. The dog barked softly in response, a subtle acknowledgement of the bond formed through trust. Karen hugged her daughter tightly, her own eyes welling with tears. Mark patted Lily's head, proud of the tiny hero who had unknowingly captured hearts across the community. The courtroom buzzed with renewed energy, the story evolving from a legal review into a narrative about empathy, courage, and the extraordinary capacity of children to teach adults lessons about trust. The day concluded with murmurs of admiration, speculation, and reflection. Judge Henderson promised that all factors would be carefully considered before any rulings were made. The Thompson family left the courtroom that evening, weary but emotionally uplifted. Lily, clutching her stuffed rabbit and oblivious to the media frenzy, bounced along happily, her small footsteps leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. The story of a toddler facing a police dog had already begun to reshape perceptions of innocence, courage, and the unexpected power of empathy. As the Thompson family drove home, Karen reflected on how a simple phrase, "It's okay, puppy," had diffused tension, captured public attention, and inspired adults to rethink assumptions. Mark glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror, her eyes bright with curiosity and mischief, and smiled. They had walked into a courtroom expecting scrutiny and concern, yet they left having witnessed something far more remarkable: the quiet, profound courage of a 3-year-old who, with nothing more than innocence and trust, had transformed a tense situation into a moment of wonder and possibility. The following day, the courtroom was a mix of anticipation, curiosity, and tension. Reporters, neighbors, and legal professionals filled the benches, waiting for the testimonies that could determine how the incident with Lily and Kaiser would be officially perceived. The air buzzed with whispered debates, some defending the police actions, others championing the child's bravery. Karen and Mark sat near the front, holding Lily's tiny hands. Their daughter fidgeted with her stuffed rabbit, occasionally peeking at Kaiser, who remained calm and obedient at Officer Randall's side. The family's nerves were taut, but Lily's innocence seemed to radiate, casting a quiet spell over the room. The first to testify was Officer Randall. He recounted the events of that afternoon in meticulous detail, describing the call from the neighbor and the rapid response by the department. His voice was professional, but tinged with a hint of unease. "We received a report of a suspicious person near the Thompson residence," he began, and responded with standard protocol. Kaiser was deployed as a precaution. Upon arrival, we observed a toddler in the yard. He paused, choosing his words carefully. The child approached the dog, seemingly unaware of the potential danger. Her calm behavior was remarkable, though unexpected. The courtroom murmured, absorbing the juxtaposition of fear and innocence. Next, several neighbors provided their accounts. Mr. Daniels, the neighbor who had initially called 911, spoke first. He explained his concern for safety and admitted that the situation had felt urgent at the time. From my perspective, the child was in potential danger, he said. But I also realize now that my perception may have been exaggerated. His words hinted at regret and introspection, acknowledging that fear can sometimes distort judgment. The audience nodded, understanding that community reactions are often colored by worry and instinct rather than factual assessment. Then Mrs. Morales, a neighbor across the street, took the stand. She painted a different picture of Lily. She's always been fearless, Mrs. Morales explained. She approaches every animal in the neighborhood with care and curiosity. I watched her extend her hand to Kaiser, and she spoke to him gently. It was clear she wasn't scared. She has this natural empathy that I've never seen in a child her age. Her testimony resonated with the room. The contrast between perceived danger and actual behavior became clearer, highlighting the unique perspective a child can bring to situations that adults might approach with rigid caution. As the testimonies continued, a local child psychologist, Dr. Emily Sanders, was called to provide expert insight. She adjusted her glasses and spoke directly to the judge. Children of Lily's age process threats and fear differently than adults, she explained. At 3, a child can intuitively sense social cues and respond with either fear or empathy. Lily's interaction with Kaiser demonstrates a remarkable ability to calm a highly trained animal, which is uncommon but not unprecedented. Her response illustrates trust, instinctive understanding, and emotional intelligence that many adults lack in high-stress situations. The courtroom shifted again, the weight of her professional opinion emphasizing the significance of Lily's actions. Even Officer Randall, who had been cautious throughout the proceedings, seemed affected by Dr. Sanders' testimony. He nodded subtly, acknowledging that the child's instinctive behavior had diffused a potentially tense scenario. He glanced at Kaiser, whose calm demeanor mirrored the tension he had absorbed from the room. The dog's training and discipline were crucial, yet it was Lily's innocence and trust that had ultimately guided the interaction. The courtroom audience, many of whom had come expecting a routine procedural hearing, were now witnessing a profound demonstration of empathy, bridging human and animal behavior. The media seized every detail, capturing the exchanges on camera and live-streaming portions of the testimonies. Headlines began to form in real time. Toddler bravery challenges police protocol, and 3-year-old faces police dog. Teaches court about courage. Social media buzzed with commentary, with viewers across the nation debating the balance between child safety and police procedures. Some praised the officer's caution, while others celebrated Lily's fearless approach. The story quickly became more than a local legal matter. It evolved into a national conversation about childhood innocence, safety, and the surprising influence of empathy. As the witness testimonies continued, several community members shared their observations. Children's teachers, playgroup coordinators, and family friends highlighted Lily's calm nature and her unusual ability to connect with animals. They described her curiosity, her careful observation of others' emotions, and her lack of fear when meeting new creatures. She's always been different, one teacher said. She notices things adults overlook. She doesn't react with panic or aggression. She responds with understanding. Each statement added weight to the growing consensus that Lily's behavior had been extraordinary, deserving attention beyond routine procedural evaluation. The courtroom energy shifted again when a neighbor, Mr. Jennings, offered a contrasting viewpoint. He expressed concern for public safety, emphasizing the need for police caution when children are present. "I don't fault the officers," he explained. "They were doing their jobs." But this incident shows how unpredictable interactions can be when a child is involved. Procedures exist for a reason. His statement reminded the audience of the delicate balance the court had to maintain, acknowledging Lily's bravery while ensuring that public safety and protocol were not disregarded. Judge Henderson listened intently to each testimony, her pen poised over her notes. She recognized that the courtroom was grappling with complex layers: innocence, authority, responsibility, and empathy. The weight of the decision was not just procedural, it would reflect how society perceives the interaction between children, authority figures, and trained animals. She allowed each witness to complete their statements fully, giving the family, the officers, and the experts the space to share their perspectives. The judge's thoughtful demeanor reinforced that this case was about more than assigning blame. It was about understanding, learning, and potentially shaping future interactions. After several hours, the courtroom reached a brief recess. Karen held Lily close, brushing strands of hair from her face. "You're doing great, sweetie," she whispered. Mark nodded, trying to calm his own nerves. Outside, reporters huddled, discussing what had just transpired. The narrative was no longer about fear or danger. It was about a child's remarkable ability to influence events with innocence and empathy. Even the officers seemed reflective, realizing that the small actions of a toddler could teach lessons that no amount of training could replicate. The final testimonies before recess came from community child advocates and additional experts on police canine interactions. They highlighted the importance of balancing safety with empathy and the need for guidelines that consider children's unique behavior. Each expert emphasized that while protocol is critical, children are capable of unexpected responses that defy conventional expectations. Lily's ability to calm Kaiser illustrated a rare intersection of human emotion and animal training, providing a real-life case study in trust, instinct, and courage. As the recess ended and the courtroom reconvened, the atmosphere was a mixture of curiosity and quiet admiration. Spectators, officers, and media alike had witnessed something extraordinary: a 3-year-old who, through innocence and trust, had altered the perception of what was possible in a potentially tense situation. The witnesses' testimonies had not only defended the family, but had begun shaping a narrative that celebrated courage, empathy, and the unique perspective of children. For Lily, the experience remained simple. She was a little girl meeting a big puppy, but for the adults around her, it was an extraordinary lesson. Judge Henderson concluded the session with measured words. "The testimonies have provided valuable insights into the incident," she said. "This hearing demonstrates the need to consider not only procedural compliance, but also the perspectives and capabilities of children in situations involving authority and trained animals. We will carefully review the evidence, testimonies, and observations before any rulings are made." Her remarks acknowledged the unusual complexity of the case, leaving the courtroom in anticipation of the demonstration and the eventual turning point that could define the outcome. As the Thompson family left the courtroom that evening, Karen and Mark reflected on what they had just witnessed. Their daughter, blissfully unaware of the weight of adult judgment, had navigated a complex social and legal environment with her signature innocence. Lily's actions had not only influenced the police dog, but had also begun influencing the adults, neighbors, and media watching. The story of the 3-year-old girl who faced a police dog had grown far beyond a simple legal matter. It had become a conversation about empathy, courage, and the profound impact of childhood innocence. The courtroom had reached a quiet tension that seemed almost tangible. After hours of witness testimonies, expert analyses, and neighborhood opinions, everyone was waiting for the moment that might define the outcome of the unusual case. The media cameras clicked incessantly, reporters whispered excitedly, and even the officers, who had been cautious throughout the proceedings, leaned forward, curious and attentive. At the center of it all was Lily, a 3-year-old toddler who, until that morning, had been oblivious to the significance of her actions and the national attention surrounding them. Judge Henderson called the court back to order. "We will now proceed with direct questioning of the minor involved," she announced. Her voice was calm, firm, yet gentle, recognizing the unusual nature of the proceeding. Karen held Lily tightly on her lap, whispering softly to calm her nerves. Mark stood close by, trying to appear composed despite the rapid thrum of his heart. For them, the uncertainty was overwhelming. How could a toddler, barely able to form complete sentences, possibly influence a courtroom full of adults, lawyers, and officers? The prosecutor, a tall, methodical woman named Miss Caldwell, stepped forward. She adjusted her notes and cleared her throat. "Lily," she said gently, kneeling slightly to be at eye level with the toddler, "I have a very important question for you. Are you afraid of the dog?" The courtroom fell silent. Even the journalists leaned forward, anticipating the response. All eyes were on Lily, who blinked and tilted her head at the question. She considered it for a moment, her tiny hands clutching her stuffed rabbit tightly. Then, with a clarity and calmness that stunned everyone, Lily shook her head. "No," she said softly. "He's my friend if he's nice." The words were simple, almost childlike in their innocence, yet they carried a weight that silenced the entire courtroom. Officers exchanged glances, realizing the depth of what had just been said. The room seemed to pause, absorbing the profound truth in the toddler's statement. A child's voice, honest and unpretentious, had cut through protocol, fear, and tension, leaving adults to reconsider the incident from a wholly new perspective. Judge Henderson leaned back slightly in her chair, her eyes thoughtful. She had presided over countless cases, but rarely had she witnessed a moment that combined innocence, courage, and insight so powerfully. "Ms. Caldwell?" The prosecutor also paused. Recognizing that this answer required more than legal interpretation, it demanded reflection on human behavior, empathy, and trust. The public gallery was hushed, and even Kaiser, the police dog, seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere, tilting his head as if acknowledging the wisdom of the tiny girl before him. Karen felt a lump in her throat. She whispered to Mark, She's amazing." Mark nodded, unable to take his eyes off Lily, who now reached her tiny hand toward Kaiser again, her gesture instinctively bridging the gap between child and trained canine. The officers in the room watched closely, recognizing that the dog's behavior had shifted once more. Kaiser sat obediently, tail wagging gently, reflecting the trust and calm that Lily exuded without understanding the broader implications. It was as if the entire courtroom had been transformed by a single innocent statement. Ms. Caldwell, recovering from the unexpected impact of Lily's words, continued cautiously. "Lily," she asked softly, "why do you think he's your friend if he's nice?" Lily's answer was immediate, uncomplicated, and profound in its simplicity. "Because puppies are kind if you are kind to them," she said. The room erupted not in noise, but in a shared sense of realization. Adults nodded, some even wiped tears from their eyes. The courtroom had been so focused on rules, procedures, and caution that it had forgotten the power of empathy and understanding. A 3-year-old had reminded everyone what truly mattered. Dr. Emily Sanders, the child psychologist, spoke up from her seat. "This is a textbook demonstration of innate emotional intelligence." Lily's response shows the natural ability of children to read cues, assess intent, and respond appropriately. It is rare, but it highlights the need for adults to recognize and respect these instincts. Her words reinforced the impact of Lily's testimony. What had started as a procedural review of a minor incident had evolved into a study of human and animal interaction, trust, and the extraordinary influence of innocence. The spectators, neighbors, and media representatives were visibly moved. The story had grown beyond a legal review. It was now a narrative about courage, trust, and perspective. Some officers whispered quietly among themselves, acknowledging that they had underestimated the power of a child's instinctive calm. Even Officer Randall, who had handled the situation in the yard, was taken aback. He murmured, She just teaches you something you can't train." Kaiser, calm and obedient, seemed to reflect that very lesson, sitting quietly at his handler's side, a silent witness to the moment of understanding. Judge Henderson then asked Karen to bring Lily closer to Kaiser. With her mother's guidance, Lily approached the dog, holding her stuffed rabbit as a symbolic offering of peace. Kaiser sniffed her hand gently, then sat back, tail wagging. The courtroom murmured in awe. It was a visual affirmation of Lily's words, a living demonstration of trust bridging potential fear. The audience, both in person and via media feeds, was captivated. Even skeptics had to concede that the toddler's innocence and courage had transformed the entire atmosphere of the courtroom. The emotional weight of the moment was palpable. Witnesses who had initially been concerned about protocol now nodded in quiet admiration. Neighbors who had feared for Lily's safety smiled, realizing that the incident had been handled with more nuance than they had imagined. Media personnel captured every gesture and expression, aware that they were witnessing a story that would resonate far beyond this small courtroom. The nation's attention, already sparked by the unusual nature of the case, now focused on the remarkable bravery of a tiny child. Karen hugged Lily tightly afterward, whispering softly, "You're so brave, sweetie." Mark patted her head, overwhelmed with pride and awe. Lily giggled, completely unconcerned with the attention, repeating, "Puppy's nice." The simplicity of her words allied the profound impact they had on everyone present. Judge Henderson took a moment to compose her thoughts, recognizing that the case had shifted from a procedural review to a demonstration of empathy, innocence, and courage. The turning point had been reached, and the outcome of the hearing was now imbued with a human lesson that transcended law and protocol. The courtroom adjourned briefly after the demonstration, allowing everyone to reflect. The story of a 3-year-old facing a police dog had moved from local curiosity to national inspiration. Social media buzzed with clips and headlines, celebrating Lily's bravery and the unexpected lesson she had taught the courtroom. News anchors discussed the story on live broadcasts, emphasizing how empathy and trust could overcome fear, even in high-stress situations. The Thompson family, though overwhelmed, understood that Lily's innocence had done something extraordinary. It had changed perspectives, softened hearts, and challenged assumptions. By the end of the day, the courtroom was abuzz with admiration and reflection. Judge Henderson emphasized that her final ruling would take into account not only the procedures followed, but also the unique circumstances, the behavior of all involved, and the lessons learned from Lily's interaction with Kaiser. For Karen and Mark, the relief was profound. Their daughter, unaware of her growing fame, had faced a tense, adult situation with nothing more than her natural curiosity, empathy, and bravery. Her actions had shifted the courtroom and left a lasting impression on everyone present. As the Thompson family left the courtroom, Karen held Lily close, feeling the weight of what had just transpired. Mark walked beside them, still awed by the tiny girl's courage. They had entered expecting scrutiny, tension, and fear. Instead, they had witnessed a moment that would be remembered for years. A 3-year-old who had reminded a room full of adults of the power of innocence, empathy, and trust. The story was no longer just about a police dog and a minor incident. It had become a lesson in humanity, courage, and perspective. The courtroom was charged with anticipation. Every seat was filled, cameras were rolling, and the air hummed with the collective curiosity of reporters, neighbors, and legal professionals. The unusual case of a 3-year-old girl facing a police dog had already captured national attention, and now everyone waited to witness the live demonstration. Karen and Mark sat near the front, Lily perched on her mother's lap, clutching her stuffed rabbit. She bounced slightly with excitement, unaware of the tension surrounding her, as though she were about to play a simple game with a friendly dog rather than face a courtroom full of adults. Kaiser, the German shepherd, sat beside Officer Randall, calm but alert. His training had prepared him for high-stress scenarios, but the dynamics of a courtroom were unusual even for him. Officer Randall adjusted the leash, ensuring control without showing tension. "Stay calm, boy," he murmured. The officers had meticulously planned the demonstration, but the unpredictability of a toddler interacting with a police dog added a layer of suspense that no protocol could account for. The courtroom audience leaned forward, whispering in hushed tones, aware that this moment could define the outcome of the case. Judge Henderson called the court to order. "We will now proceed with the live demonstration," she announced. Her voice was calm, precise, and measured, acknowledging the unusual nature of the proceeding. She looked directly at Lily, offering reassurance with a gentle nod. Karen whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Just be yourself." Mark smiled softly at his daughter, his eyes filled with pride and concern. Lily, clutching her stuffed rabbit, smiled back, blissfully unaware that the entire nation was watching her next move. Lily was guided to a marked area on the courtroom floor, leaving just enough space for her to interact with Kaiser safely. The officers instructed the audience to remain silent. The media cameras focused intently, capturing every detail. Lily took a deep breath, her small chest rising and falling, and then approached Kaiser slowly, just as she had done in the yard weeks earlier. Her tiny hand extended, holding the stuffed rabbit like a symbolic offering of trust and peace. "Kaiser, puppy," Lily whispered softly, her voice carrying through the hushed courtroom. The dog's ears twitched, and he sniffed the air cautiously. The tension in the room seemed to dissipate as everyone watched this remarkable interaction unfold. The officers relaxed slightly, realizing that the same instinctive calm Lily had displayed before was once again affecting the trained canine. The courtroom, once filled with uncertainty, now held a collective sense of awe. Lily reached up, her tiny fingers brushing Kaiser's head. "It's okay, puppy," she said confidently. The dog lowered his snout gently, allowing her to stroke him. Murmurs of admiration rippled through the audience. Reporters clicked their cameras furiously, capturing the incredible sight of a toddler calmly interacting with a police dog in a courtroom setting. Witnesses who had been concerned about safety nodded, acknowledging that the child's behavior was extraordinary, perhaps even life-changing for those present. Dr. Emily Sanders, the child psychologist observing the demonstration, spoke quietly to Judge Henderson. "This is a textbook example of innate empathy and emotional intelligence in a young child," she explained. Lily's ability to calm Kaiser demonstrates the power of trust, instinct, and gentle leadership. It is rare but remarkable. Even highly trained adults often struggle to elicit such calm in a police dog. Her behavior highlights how children can influence outcomes through their innate understanding of social cues. The judge nodded thoughtfully, aware of the significance of the psychologist's analysis. The officers, too, were visibly impressed. Officer Randall whispered under his breath, "She's doing exactly what we feared would be impossible." The dog remained calm, responsive only to Lily's gentle gestures. The courtroom, filled with adults accustomed to authority and control, watched in stunned silence. For the first time, the power dynamics of the room shifted not through force or protocol, but through innocence and trust. The tiny girl had captured the attention, respect, and admiration of everyone present. The audience reaction was subtle but profound. Spectators leaned forward, some whispering softly to one another, while others simply watched, their eyes wide with awe. Media representatives jotted notes furiously, aware they were documenting a story that transcended the usual courtroom drama. Social media feeds were already buzzing with clips of the interaction, quickly spreading across the nation. Hashtags celebrating Lily's courage and empathy began trending. Even people who had initially questioned the child's safety were now applauding her bravery and instinctive understanding. Karen's heart swelled as she watched her daughter. She whispered, "You're amazing, sweetie," brushing Lily's hair gently from her face. Mark smiled, unable to contain his pride. The simplicity of Lily's actions, a gentle extension of a hand, a few soft words, a tender touch, had created a ripple effect that impacted everyone in the room. Judges, officers, spectators, and media alike were witnessing a moment of genuine humanity, a lesson in courage and empathy that no training or procedure could replicate. Lily spoke again, her tiny voice clear and confident. "Puppy, you're my friend. You're nice." Kaiser responded with a soft bark, wagging his tail gently. The courtroom collectively exhaled, a wave of emotion passing through the audience. The demonstration was over, yet the impact lingered. Adults who had arrived expecting a procedural review left with a renewed understanding of the power of trust, innocence, and empathy. The scene had transcended legality. It had become a lesson in humanity. Judge Henderson addressed the court, her voice carrying a note of reverence. This demonstration provides profound insight into the interaction between children and trained animals. It also highlights the importance of considering context, empathy, and instinct when evaluating situations that may initially appear dangerous. The behavior observed today will be critical in the final assessment of this case. Her words acknowledged the unique significance of the moment, emphasizing that the courtroom had witnessed something far beyond routine proceedings. Even Officer Randall, who had been cautious throughout the hearings, appeared moved. He nodded to colleagues quietly, acknowledging that Lily's innate trust had accomplished what no adult instruction or command could. Kaiser remained calm, a living testament to the influence of innocence and kindness. The demonstration had proved that fear and authority are not the only forces capable of controlling outcomes. Sometimes, courage comes in the form of empathy, trust, and a tiny, fearless heart. As the demonstration concluded, Lily was returned to her parents' arms. She waved at Kaiser one last time, smiling brightly. "Bye-bye, puppy," she said cheerfully, her innocence undiminished by the attention. Karen hugged her tightly, overwhelmed by the impact of her daughter's actions. Mark patted her head gently, proud of the little girl who had, with nothing more than her natural curiosity and trust, changed the dynamics of a courtroom, touched the hearts of adults, and taught a profound lesson about courage. The courtroom erupted quietly in admiration. Witnesses, neighbors, and experts nodded, realizing that the story had evolved into a narrative about trust, bravery, and the remarkable capacity of children to influence outcomes in ways adults often overlook. Media representatives captured the scene with reverence, knowing that this story would resonate far beyond the courtroom walls. Social media feeds flooded with praise, admiration, and awe for the tiny girl who had faced a mighty K9 with nothing but innocence and courage. By the end of the day, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted completely. What had begun as a tense procedural review had transformed into a celebration of empathy, bravery, and trust. Judge Henderson carefully noted the observations, the testimonies, and the demonstration, aware that the outcome would need to reflect not only legal protocol, but also the extraordinary circumstances witnessed. Karen and Mark left the courtroom that evening exhausted, but elated, knowing their daughter had accomplished something remarkable, a reminder that courage is often found in the smallest hearts. As the Thompson family walked home that evening, Lily hummed happily, clutching her stuffed rabbit, unaware of the national attention she had garnered. Karen and Mark reflected on the events, realizing that their tiny daughter had done more than calm a police dog. She had changed perspectives, inspired empathy, and reminded everyone present of the extraordinary power of innocence. The story of Lily Thompson and Kaiser had grown beyond a local incident. It had become a nationwide lesson in courage, trust, and the unexpected ways in which a small child can influence the world. The courtroom had never been quieter. Weeks of testimony, demonstrations, and discussions had led to this moment, the verdict. Judge Henderson reviewed her notes carefully, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom. The media cameras were rolling, spectators leaned forward, and even the officers who had participated in the demonstration watched with anticipation. At the center of it all sat Lily, perched on Karen's lap, clutching her stuffed rabbit as if nothing unusual were happening. To her, it was simply another day to explore, play, and interact, but for everyone else, it was the culmination of an extraordinary story. Judge Henderson's voice cut through the silence. After careful review of all testimony, demonstrations, and expert analysis, this court finds that no further legal action is required regarding the incident involving Lily Thompson and the police canine Kaiser, she announced. Her words were deliberate, precise, and filled with a weight that reflected the unique nature of the case. A murmur of relief rippled through the audience. Karen's hand flew to her mouth, and Mark exhaled audibly, holding their daughter tightly. Lily's eyes sparkled, oblivious to the significance of the announcement. The courtroom erupted into soft applause, not overly loud, but enough to express collective admiration. Witnesses who had initially been skeptical nodded in agreement, recognizing that Lily's actions had not only demonstrated bravery, but had also diffused a potentially dangerous situation. Officer Randall exchanged glances with his colleagues, a subtle smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Even seasoned officers, trained to handle tense encounters, found themselves inspired by the courage and empathy displayed by a tiny 3-year-old girl. Outside the courtroom, the story was already spreading like wildfire. Reporters streamed live, describing the verdict with awe and enthusiasm. Headlines formed almost instantaneously. Toddler triumphs in courtroom drama. 3-year-old girl calms police dog, wins hearts nationwide. And innocence and bravery prevail in unusual court case. Social media exploded with comments, videos, and praise for Lily, the tiny girl who had faced a trained police dog with nothing but innocence, had become a symbol of courage, empathy, and the unexpected power of children. Karen and Mark were approached by neighbors and community members after the verdict. Many expressed admiration, some with tears in their eyes. Mrs. Morales, the neighbor who had praised Lily's fearless nature from the beginning, hugged Karen tightly. "She's extraordinary," Mrs. Morales whispered. Not just because she faced a dog, but because she reminded all of us what courage really looks like. Mr. Daniels, who had initially called the police, also approached, his demeanor humble. "I overreacted," he admitted quietly, "seeing how she handled everything. I understand now. She taught us all a lesson." The officers involved in the case were visibly affected. Officer Randall knelt beside Lily, giving her a small pat on the head. "You really impressed us, kiddo," he said softly, a rare smile breaking through his usual seriousness. Kaiser, the police dog, wagged his tail gently, as if acknowledging Lily's calm authority once again. The courtroom demonstration had not only influenced the verdict, but had created a moment of connection between human, child, and animal that few present would ever forget. As the family exited the courthouse, reporters called out questions, eager for quotes and reactions. Karen and Mark carefully guided Lily through the crowd. She waved cheerfully, blissfully unaware of her growing fame. When a reporter asked, "Lily, how did you feel facing Kaiser?" she replied with a giggle, "He's my friend. He's nice." The simplicity and purity of her words resonated deeply with everyone listening. Adults, conditioned to complicate situations with fear, rules, and authority, were reminded that courage often comes in the simplest forms. The community's reaction in the following days was overwhelmingly positive. Local businesses decorated windows with messages of congratulations. Neighbors shared videos and stories of the courtroom demonstration. And even city officials acknowledged Lily's bravery during a brief public address. Social media posts praising her actions went viral, creating a national conversation about childhood courage, empathy, and the potential lessons adults can learn from children. The Thompson family became symbols of hope and inspiration, though they remained modest and grounded despite the attention. For Karen and Mark, the verdict was both a relief and a revelation. Their tiny daughter, who had always approached the world with curiosity and kindness, had faced a situation far beyond her age with extraordinary grace. "She's teaching us more than we ever imagined," Karen whispered, holding Lily close as they walked home. Mark nodded, still in awe. "I never thought a 3-year-old could show the world courage and calm like that," he said softly. "She's remarkable." Lily, as always, responded simply, "Puppy's nice," blissfully returning to her playful worldview. The officers involved reflected on the experience with newfound respect. Officer Randall admitted privately that the case had shifted his understanding of how humans and animals interact under stress. "She reminded us that fear doesn't have to dictate behavior," he said. "Sometimes empathy and trust are stronger than training or authority." Kaiser, now familiar with the toddler's presence, had become a calm, patient companion, demonstrating the subtle yet profound effect Lily's innocence had on those around her. Local schools and child advocacy groups began referencing the case as a teaching example. Educators highlighted Lily's instinctive empathy, emotional intelligence, and ability to assess social cues. Community leaders used the story to inspire discussions about courage, kindness, and the influence of children in shaping perspectives. The courtroom incident became a model not only for law enforcement, but also for understanding human behavior and the unique capacities of young children. Even nationally, the story sparked conversations in parenting forums, law enforcement seminars, and media commentary programs. Experts discussed the delicate balance between safety protocols and human empathy, often referencing Lily as a case study. Across the country, parents shared their children's interactions with pets. Community members reflected on assumptions about risk, and officers discussed new approaches to training when children are involved. The tiny girl's actions had created ripples far beyond the Ohio courtroom, influencing hearts, minds, and policies alike. As the media coverage continued, Karen and Mark found themselves fielding interviews and appearances. Yet, despite the growing fame, they remained grounded. "Lily didn't do anything extraordinary on purpose," Karen said in one interview. "She's just a little girl being herself. She sees the world simply, without fear or judgment. That's what makes her remarkable." Mark added, "We're proud, of course, but more than anything, we're grateful that people can see the lesson she's teaching without even trying. It's a lesson in kindness and courage that all of us can learn from." By the end of the week, the courtroom story had settled into legend within the community. Local journalists compiled their coverage, social media posts went viral, and neighboring communities shared their admiration for Lily's bravery. Officers who had once doubted the influence of a toddler's presence now spoke of her with respect and even a hint of awe. The Thompson family returned to their daily lives, but the impact of Lily's courage continued to reverberate. The courtroom verdict was more than a legal resolution. It was a celebration of innocence, trust, and the profound lessons a tiny child could teach an entire community. Even months later, Neighbors would recount the story with pride and amazement. Karen and Mark often watched Lily playing in the yard, her stuffed rabbit in hand, and reflected on how one small girl had reminded everyone that courage is not measured by size, authority, or strength, but by trust, empathy, and the willingness to face the world with an open heart. Lily's calm, courageous interaction with Kaiser had changed the courtroom, the community, and even the media narrative. It had proven that the smallest voices can make the loudest impact. The verdict was more than a legal conclusion. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that innocence, empathy, and courage can influence even the most structured systems. The Thompson family had walked into a courtroom expecting scrutiny, but they had left having witnessed and participated in something extraordinary. Lily had not only faced a police dog, she had faced the weight of expectation, fear, and doubt, and emerged as a beacon of bravery and compassion. The courtroom, the officers, the community, and the nation had all learned a profound lesson from a 3-year-old who simply said, "Puppy's nice." In the weeks following the courtroom verdict, the Thompson family's life transformed in ways they never expected. Karen and Mark had anticipated some attention after Lily's remarkable encounter with Kaiser, but the scale of national and local interest far exceeded their imagination. Reporters, news anchors, and social media commentators revisited the story repeatedly, fascinated by the bravery and instinctive empathy of a 3-year-old girl. Headlines such as "Toddler's Courage Calms Police Dog" captures hearts nationwide, and Lily Thompson shows the power of innocence and trust dominated print and online news for days, cementing the story as one that resonated far beyond the Ohio community. Neighbors continued to share their admiration, recounting the courtroom incident as though it were folklore. Children in the neighborhood played pretend games with stuffed animals, inspired by Lily's courage. Local schools discussed the story during lessons on empathy, bravery, and community responsibility. Teachers highlighted Lily's natural ability to read social cues and her instinctive kindness, framing her as a model of emotional intelligence. For many, her story was a reminder that children, despite their size and age, could influence adults, and situations in ways that were profound and unexpected. The police department, too, reflected on the events and their broader implications. Officer Randall and his colleagues participated in internal discussions about interactions between canine units and children. Training programs were subtly adapted to emphasize the importance of recognizing children's unique instincts and responses, as well as the value of empathy in handling high-stress scenarios. Kaiser, now a household name among the media covering the story, was praised for his calm behavior, which showcased the importance of training paired with human influence. The officer who had once feared unpredictable behavior found himself humbled by the lessons a toddler could teach. National media continued to feature Lily in interviews, often highlighting the innocence and clarity of her perspective. On live broadcasts, Karen spoke carefully, emphasizing her daughter's natural empathy rather than any deliberate heroism. "She's just being herself," Karen explained. "She sees the world without fear or judgment. That's what makes her special." Mark added, "It's incredible to see how people respond to her simplicity." The courtroom, our community, even people we've never met, they all saw courage through a child's eyes. That's powerful. Lily, clutching her stuffed rabbit, occasionally waved at cameras, giggling innocently as though she understood none of the attention. The community of Maplewood, Ohio, embraced Lily as a local hero. City officials invited the family to a small ceremony at the town hall, celebrating Lily's bravery and the positive attention she had brought to the town. Children's activities were organized around themes of courage and empathy, inspired directly by Lily's actions. Teachers incorporated lessons on responsibility, kindness, and the power of trust, referencing how a small child could change a tense situation into one of understanding and calm. It became a defining moment for the community, reinforcing shared values and highlighting the potential of children to teach adults meaningful lessons. For Karen and Mark, the experience was both overwhelming and inspiring. They balanced their daughter's newfound fame with the importance of maintaining her normal childhood. Playdates, naps, and family outings remained central to their routine, ensuring Lily could enjoy the innocence of her age despite the attention. Yet the family also recognized the opportunity to use the story positively. Local charities and community organizations asked the Thompsons to speak at events, often highlighting themes of empathy, courage, and responsible interaction with animals. The family's message remained consistent. The most extraordinary bravery often comes in small, subtle acts. In the legal and law enforcement communities, the story prompted broader discussions about children's interactions with trained animals. Experts in child psychology, animal behavior, and public safety referenced the incident in seminars and conferences, analyzing how instinctive trust and empathy could alter outcomes. Workshops were designed to help officers recognize and respond to children in high-stress situations, with Lily's courtroom encounter serving as a primary case study. The tiny girl who had calmed a police dog in a courtroom became a symbol for both legal and humane approaches to safety, demonstrating that courage and understanding are not mutually exclusive. Even months later, the story continued to inspire media attention. Human interest programs invited Karen and Mark for interviews, while educational shows replayed footage of Lily and Kaiser interacting. Social media continued to highlight her actions, often accompanied by reflections on the power of innocence and trust. Hashtags praising Lily's bravery trended, encouraging discussions about emotional intelligence, empathy, and child development. Her story became a touchstone for parents, educators, and law enforcement professionals alike, demonstrating that a small child's perspective can challenge adult assumptions and inspire broader societal reflection. For the Thompsons, the greatest legacy of the incident was personal. Karen and Mark marveled at their daughter's natural courage and calmness. "It's amazing to watch her navigate the world," Karen said one evening. "She's teaching U.S. lessons we never expected to learn in a courtroom or from a police dog." Mark nodded, watching Lily arrange her stuffed animals in a careful line on the living room floor. "She doesn't even realize the impact she's had," he said. "But she's changed so many people's perspectives simply by being herself." The family recognized that the influence of innocence and empathy could extend far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Lily's influence extended beyond adults as well. Children who heard her story began approaching their own interactions with animals and peers differently. Playgrounds and classrooms buzzed with discussions about kindness, courage, and trust. Teachers reported that students emulated Lily's gentle approach when meeting animals, reinforcing empathy as an important life skill. The incident, while small in scale, had created a ripple effect, demonstrating that bravery and calmness could be contagious, inspiring a generation of children to approach challenges with understanding rather than fear. As the media attention gradually subsided, the Thompson family returned to a quieter routine. Yet the story of Lily and Kaiser remained in the hearts of those who had witnessed it firsthand. Community members continued to recount the courtroom demonstration, neighbors praised the family's bravery and humility, and even the officers involved reflected on the lesson taught by a child who, without intention, had bridged the gap between fear and trust. The tiny girl who had faced a police dog in court had left an indelible mark, not just in her hometown, but across the nation. In the evenings, Karen and Mark would often sit together, reflecting on the past months. "She's taught us more than we could have imagined," Karen said softly, watching Lily laugh as she played with her stuffed animals. Mark smiled, thinking about the courtroom, the officers, and the countless viewers inspired by Lily's courage. "It's incredible how much one little person can influence the world," he replied. They understood that their daughter's story was bigger than themselves. It was a story of empathy, trust, and the remarkable lessons children can teach, simply by being true to themselves. Even years later, Lily's name would evoke admiration and inspiration. The incident with Kaiser became a teaching tool, a symbol of courage without aggression, and a testament to the power of innocence. Families recounted the story at gatherings. Educators used it in lessons, and law enforcement professionals referenced it when training officers on interactions with children. The courtroom in Maplewood, Ohio, where a 3-year-old girl faced a trained police dog with nothing but a stuffed rabbit and courage, had become legendary. The story would endure, a reminder that bravery does not require size or authority, only trust, kindness, and the courage to be oneself. Ultimately, Lily's encounter with Kaiser and the courtroom demonstration became more than a news story. It became a symbol of hope, inspiration, and human connection. It reminded everyone from children to adults, from neighbors to professionals. Empathy and innocence have a power that cannot be measured by age or strength. Lily Thompson, in her quiet, fearless way, had not only calmed a police dog, but had also left a lasting impression on her community, her country, and anyone willing to witness the extraordinary courage of a tiny heart. The Thompson family often reflected on the journey. "She didn't know she was making history," Karan said one evening, watching Lily arrange her toys. Mark nodded, holding his wife's hand. "She just knew what felt right. And in doing so, she changed a lot of lives, ours included." Lily's story became a living testament to the idea that courage, empathy, and trust can transform even the most intimidating situations. The legacy of a 3-year-old girl and a police dog endured, inspiring generations to come, teaching the world that innocence, when paired with bravery, can truly change everything.